Before we get started here, let me remind you, if you haven't already, to become a subscriber so you don't miss anything. On July 1st, the Chinese Communist Party celebrated its 100th anniversary. 2 weeks before that, the People's Liberation Army Navy launched its third aircraft carrier, and this one is a huge leap in technology and capability from the previous two. So the new one, which they've named Fujian after the southeastern province that faces Taiwan, has hull number 18 and is their first attempt to build a conventional carrier. The Fujian weighs in at 80,000 tons, is 1,037 feet long and 279 feet wide, which makes it about the size of a Forrestal class carrier in the U.S. Navy. Its signature feature is 3 electromagnetic aircraft launch system, EMALS, which we discussed in length when we were talking about the USS Ford. EMALS doesn't use steam, but electronic impulse to launch airplanes. So basically, the Chinese skipped a generation, going from a ski jump bow to a conventional carrier and not using steam catapults. So they've jumped right to EMALS. The EMALS system was developed at their base at Huang de Kun, which is their version of our base at Lakehurst, New Jersey, where we do our arresting gear and catapult testing. Now, this infographic shows you the relative size of the supercarriers from Gerald R. Ford down to the Liaoning. So in the tail of the tape, Fujian would be number 3 between Nimitz and Shandong in terms of displacement and length overall. So obviously the most important part of an aircraft carrier is aircraft. So the Shandong currently operates 24 J-15s, both strike fighters and this electronic attack variant that they're developing, as well as 12 helicopters. The Fujian, on the other hand, is going to have 38 strike fighters, 4 electronic attack airplanes, 3 of their new AEW aircraft, which have the designation of KJ-600s, their version of the Hawkeye, and 6 helicopters. By comparison, when the Ford is fully up and running, it's going to operate 45 strike fighters, a mix of Super Hornets and F-35s, 6 Growlers, 4 E-2D Hawkeye advanced early warning aircraft, 6 drone tankers, the MQ-25s, and 8 helicopters, the H-60s. And more than just the numbers of airplanes in a carrier air wing is the question about how many sorties can an aircraft carrier generate. There is some evidence that the People's Liberation Army Navy is getting its act together with respect to generating more sorties. The Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force observed about 300 takeoffs and landings from the Liaoning during her week-long drill. Now, for comparison, it wouldn't be a huge stretch for a Nimitz-class carrier to do 300 sorties in a single day. And don't forget, the Nimitz and Ford class have 4 catapults, while the Fujian only has 3. So when we're talking about the China threat, you'll hear the terms first island chain and second island chain. So as we look at this map, you can see that the first island chain basically rings the East China Sea and the South China Sea. And the greatest threat to the United States within the first island chain is the idea that China might invade Taiwan. So an important thing to note about the Fujian and the first and second island chains and Chinese tactical goals is that carrier is conventionally powered, oil burning. So yes, it's got EMALS, and EMALS, as we know from the Ford episode, consumes a lot of power. This carrier is not going to be able to go very far without refueling. Currently, the PLAN only has 2 Type 901 fast combat support ships that can keep up with an aircraft carrier, in addition to 7 smaller and slower Type 903A replenishment ships. So as a function of this limitation, China has worked closely to establish security ties with other countries in the Asia-Pacific region like Cambodia and more recently the Solomon Islands, which would grant them access for resupply and refueling. They also have the comfort of additional air support from mainland-based strike fighters like the JH-7 and tanker support from the H-6Ks, some which have been modified the H-6N standard, capable of carrying the DF-21 tactical ballistic missile, which has been dubbed as the carrier killer. So as we talk about the People's Liberation Army Navy's operations within the first island chain, it's important to note what analysts believe is their operational construct, which is, unlike the American Navy that treats the aircraft carrier as a strike asset, an offensive asset, the Chinese Navy views them as defensive. The PLAN's principal offensive threat is the Type 55 class destroyer, which has 112 vertical launch system cells holding the CJ-10 and YJ-18 cruise missiles. And as reported by Aviation Week recently, a video emerged in April that suggests that the Type 55 could also deploy the DF-21 class ballistic missiles, which has been unofficially dubbed the YJ-21. This capability gives the PLAN the ability to hit strategic targets far from its shores, and the carrier air wing could merely be a platform to protect these high-value units from hostile air attacks. Now, as far as the PLAN's threats to the second island chain, which goes as far east as Guam, the Fujian air wing is going to need to fully incorporate the J-35, which is their version of our F-35, except the J-35 has got 2 engines. The J-35 has also recently been redesigned with folding wings and new vertical stabilizers and landing gear. Flew for the first time last October. It was repainted in a light gray scheme and the PLAN ensign that suggests it is close to being tested on an operational vessel. And they're also going to need to incorporate the KJ-600 in the air wing, which, as we mentioned before, is their version of the Hawkeye, their advanced early warning airplane. Until that time, the PLAN lacks the flexibility, numbers, and the strike capability of the U.S. Navy, and to a certain extent, the French and British carriers as well. But intel sources say that their 4th aircraft carrier, which is going to be another Type 3 like the Fujian, is going to be nuclear powered, and they also intend to build 2 more after that. Of course, the actual likelihood of war is complicated by the fact that China and the United States are economically codependent, and that we've never had a potential adversary that owned domestic capital assets like China does, and was also a majority shareholder in a number of American corporations like China is. But when viewed through a military lens, China is a growing concern. The Secretary of Defense has called China the Pentagon's quote-unquote pacing threat, and the 2023 defense budget submission is by and large predicated on the military moves China has made in recent years. In my episode with Representative Elaine Luria, we discussed the Davidson window, which is a term coined from Hill testimony given by Admiral Phil Davidson, who was Indo-PACOM, the component commander in charge of the Pacific area of operations at that time, where he stated that China wasn't currently in a position to invade Taiwan, but would be by about 2027. China now has the biggest navy in the world numbers-wise. They also have a superior industrial base than the US's current one, and can build combatant ships in less than half the time, as we've demonstrated we can over the last decade or so. The bottom line is the floating of the Fujian is a game changer with respect to the military threat posed by China, not only for the near-term capabilities a conventional carrier brings to the PLAN, but for what it indicates in terms of Chinese aspirations to push beyond a regional presence to a global one that truly rivals what the U.S. Navy is capable of. All right, that's going to do it for this episode. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon below. Become a patron at patreon.com/wardcarroll. And in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again soon.